Hey everyone, it is Dr. Nicole Carter with Smart Brown Girls. Today we are discussing the last theme from The Secret Lives of Church Ladies. Our last theme is the Black Church. I'm still waiting for CJ, but we can go ahead and get started while we are waiting to see if they pop on. Um, so again, make sure you grab your syllabus so that you can follow along. I hope that you either got the audio book or the actual book. It is a really easy read. And it's important to have it and to have the syllabus because there is an author chat on the 4th um, and on our Facebook Live and YouTube. Um, so this week, again, today, we're focusing on the Black church. And with that, the Black church obviously runs throughout this book. And so um, there are a lot of things and questions in the syllabus. So please make sure that you um, ask questions, make comments so that this can be as interactive as possible. Just in case I'm not joined by CJ, but oh, here she is. Okay, there you are. Hey,
Hi. Sorry I'm
hey,
late.
it's
It
okay.
is
Everyone,
nice
this
to
is
see you.
CJ.
Hello.
You might have seen them on other chats or discussions. But
Yes,
I
yes.
hadn't started yet.
Okay.
But I did go over the theme. So I can ask the first question if you want to.
Sure,
Uh,
sure.
okay. So the first question that we have is what do the Black girls in this collection think about the Black church? Consider Jael and Olivia from Peach Cobbler.
Yeah. So, the first thing that comes to mind is complicated, I think. I think that uh, one of the kind of overarching themes with this collection of short stories is the idea of there being glamour and theater to the church and everyone kind of existing kind of like ants in an anthill through it.
Mhm.
And I think that for all of them, there's like this degree of reverence for these things that they are still questioning, interrogating, vehemently opposed to, literally, perceive themselves as counter to the church, right? Especially with like relationships, but still preserve some semblance of like reverence. And that reverence could take the place of like fear of retaliation, fear in general, or actual just like it's hard to unleash like those feelings of like this is the respect that's owed to this person or these people, right? Like thinking about like Peach Cobbler, for instance,
Mhm.
like she, goes through the list. Like, I don't believe in prayer, I don't believe in God, but somehow I still fear this man that I assume to be God, right? So, like, I think complicated kind of sums up what I think of the relationship, right? Is this
Yeah.
kind of tortured, like, dialectic is the word.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. What about you?
So I think is also complex and complicated. I do believe that it's for them, for the particular Black girls that were mentioned in the question. Um, it is both a space where they are. I don't. It's like they're introduced to, I guess, like women or things, or not women. I'm sorry, men and the things associated with them that are problematic.
Mhm.
But Jael, in particular, is like this. I guess like ebb and flow, if you will, or a paradox. Like the pastor is like this person that I'm assuming is not liked, but then Jael is attracted to the wife, and so then it's like, this interesting dynamic. And but then Jael becomes the mistress, even though she's extremely young, and
Mhm.
so it's complicated. I see it as being the site of trauma. Um,
Mhm.
Perhaps that is not necessarily realized yet, but there's trauma associated with it. Um, but I also feel like they understand the role that it plays in the women in their lives. And
Mhm.
so even though they don't like it, they manage somehow.
Yeah.
So
It's so interesting because, like, while reading this book, like, I felt like I was reminded of so many different books. And I know that can be, like, kind of annoying to hear sometimes. 'Cause I, like, in, like, grad school, less so undergrad. In undergrad, they indulge every tangent. But in, like, grad school, especially, like, it's always like, you know, stop referring to outside material. Like it's annoying because other people haven't read it, would have you defer to the original text. But I think it's so interesting how what kind of genres of fiction kind of just like coagulate along the history of Black literature. So like for me, like reading this, I just kept on writing down like all of the like genres that I feel like are coming up and all of the genres that like this I feel like this text like draws from. Like when you're thinking about Jael, like I thought about like Gail Jones' Corregidora and how like the kind of grooming of like a young girl into a queer relationship and how it's like what do we do with this, we encourage the queer but we discourage the pedophile, like what do we like the grooming, what do we do with this. um and so, yeah, I'd be happy to talk about more of those books. But the point, the reason why I brought this up is because I think it's interesting to feel like this resonates with so many other types of books and stories, and because they resonate with actual true stories. Like reading this, it resonated also to like personal life and things of that nature. Um, but it's interesting to read those stories with the through line of the church because the church contains so much of like it keeps so much of one's single life, a single Black life contained. Like it's a body of thought, it's a location, it's a home, it's a place of reprieve, it's a place of repression, it's a like it encapsulates so much. So when like when it's like the trauma of like similar to like Gail Jones Corregidora, this young girl whose you know life just is ensnared with this older woman, for better or worse. But then you take the kind of the structure of the church, right? So there's this kind of like rubric of thought or value or ethics that you defer to, and so you would think that that makes it more like kind of clear cut, like oh, like this is how you should be and shouldn't be. But you know we're all messy and complicated. So even the kind of like very rigid boundaries supposedly become very messy and blurred. Um, but yeah, that was something I thought when you were talking about grooming. I don't know how I got all the way there, but I
no,
got
it's
there. I
fine.
don't
And it's also interesting that in certain cases, like you just mentioned, being in graduate school and being told to stick with the text at hand. And uh, when I teach graduate courses, I actually want them to pull from these other things.
Mm,
So this is very interesting because I want to see how things connect across
mhm,
genres in similar genres. And yeah, but it does talk about it brings up this like the complicated dynamic of the Black church, like how it's home and then not. Like,
mhm.
so okay, so I can go to the next question. So the next question asks, in Peach Cobbler, Olivia is a young observer who takes note of her mother's relationship with Pastor Neely. On page 41, she says, I enjoyed the theater of Pastor Neely's Sunday sermons. Do you think sermons are theatrical?
I think everything about the church is theatrical. I think marriage, like weddings, are theatrical. I think every bit of it. I think the aisle is theatrical. I think the donations of money is I thought, I mean, because a lot of my church experience is like concentrated at me like 12 and younger, all of it was theater. And I saw like I feel like the full gamut because I am the daughter of, you know, BX stand up peoples, but they are directly from Raleigh, North Carolina. So doing a lot of moving along the East Coast. So I saw the mega churches. I saw the Nigerian church right next to the Chinese restaurant in the Bronx, Upper West Side. Like, I feel like I saw all of it. And no matter what, I feel like the continuity of all of it was the theater.
Mhm.
At the mega church, I saw, people in stilts. I don't even remember what holiday it was. It wasn't Kwanzaa. Maybe it was Easter, but people were on
Oh my
stilts and had
goodness.
masks, and it was a whole thing. I've been to like the church off the road from the plantation, but like there is always elements. Like if you think about like those glass, um, is it glass stained? Like the tableaus
Yeah.
of Jesus Christ.
Mhm.
It's theater, right? So like I think it's not just the sermon, although those affectations are hilarious. But I think all of it is theater.
Yeah.
I feel like
I
there's so
yeah.
much. The
I
drums used to be my
completely
favorite
agree.
part.
Yes.
Yeah, because he would be like, bang. But I
Yeah.
wanted to play. My dad was a drummer. I wanted to play the drums so bad, so I was always focused in on the drummer. Because they would go even while they were talking. Like
Yeah.
they would, and so everything.
Yeah, so the part that was my favorite was when they go from talking to like starting to sing the
Oh
sermon.
yes, the slow build.
Because that's like, and then the doors to the church are open. Like
Oh
it's
yes,
like this. That is a performance. The whole thing. Like
and
you
it's
wear
so
a
interesting.
different garb. You take it off once you leave.
Mhm,
It is a procession. You so it's like you get dressed up for this, then you take it
mhm,
off. You you enter the theater, the
mhm.
stage, and then you go back out. So, and then
Yeah,
there's a set, like, there are pastors who memorize, like, the things that they're saying, at least, like, the scripture for the day, and then they just kind of
mhm.
go. And so it is like a monologue almost.
Yeah.
Uh,
Even if you think about kind of like the improv of it too, like if it fully encapsulates the gamut of theater, right? Because like one, I think it's the theater that's already set up. I mean, they're literally on a stage. That always used to like scare me. I was like, how does the deaconess? My grandmother was the deacon. My step grandmother was the deaconess at the main church I went to. I was like, how do they just not fall? Like this is like a very steep stage. Um, but it's like also it draws kind of an individual theater from you. Like I remember as a kid, like the tension of the drums, because that's the main thing I was focusing in on. It was like so like much like climb and fall, and also they'd be so long. So my eyes would be like trained on the program, being like, okay, are we at hymn number 2 yet? All right, because I want to get to hymn number 5 because I'm tired. Um, but also like feeling like every time they would like invite someone like a call, I felt like I was supposed to do something, and so like kind of drawing that theater out from you individually is also something special and also scary, and you know what have you, however you individually feel about that. So I feel like church funds the full gamut of what
mhm,
theater could possibly be.
yeah. I also think it's theater because it's it's a facade. So particularly in this this text, right? Like, so the people who are responsible for leading these sacred spaces then leave those spaces and perform in a different way. Like, they are
Mhm.
not living the lives that they are promoting.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, to me, it's like that is a whole performance as well. Like acting like
Mhm.
you are holier than thou when in all actuality, you
Mhm.
are doing the exact things that you preach about being
Yeah.
problematic. So,
And to an extent, the theater does end at like the church, but they also carry it in many
mhm,
ways with them, and them being the people who attend church, the people who are part of it. Um, that sense of gravitas, is that sense of like emboldened isn't the right word, but sure I'll use it. Like the sense of just being emboldened by not by Christ, but by something else, by the grandeur of it. Like I feel like because my step grandmother was the deaconess, however that hierarchy goes, don't know. But it was like she had teas after Sunday service, and it was like you can't it was just like so much that was like so much of that energy of theater was sustained throughout regular life. And so I keep referring back to Peach Cobbler because it's literally my favorite. uh I think it's my favorite chapter. But like the idea that um preacher Neely, I can remember his name, um that yes, he is defying his own gospel, like his own, like, by the way that he lives, he's cheating on his wife, all that stuff. um and then telling his son, like, oh, sex or premarital sex is a sin, all of those things. But the way that he still instills a sense of fear in other people, I feel like it's carrying some of the theater with him.
mhm,
We
yeah,
see the mask kind of slip sometimes, like the fact that he like doesn't want to talk to children. Although maybe, I mean, you would never know that a preacher doesn't want to talk to children because they're literally speaking on their soapbox, their Christ soapbox. So, but still, you see the facade slip, particularly in her mother's home, um, paid for by him. But yeah, I never understood the preachers being wealthy thing, but I guess that is a thing. Sorry, that's just like a side note. Like, uh, the idea of preachers being wealthy. Maybe because I grew up in New York churches where it's just like having a house is wealthy. Like you don't have a McMansion in the suburbs of Queens, but you do have a nice house and a small business.
yeah.
But
The pastors in Detroit are well, not. I'm not going to make a generalization because we have like a church on every corner, so there's that. But also, like the larger mega churches and things like that, they are paid. They
oh
have
yeah, I
like they
believe
don't
that.
even stay in Detroit. They stay outside of the city in the suburbs.
Mm.
So,
A la Gregory Hines and the Preacher's Wife.
oh
Do you remember that?
yes,
No. Or if yeah, I don't remember if well he was trying to build a megachurch. I don't think he was actually a preacher or anything.
yeah.
But I was
And
like,
that's the
well,
thing, that is also a performance, right? Like, it's
mhm,
this business person who is investing in this thing to, demonstrate like, it's like they're acting to make this money
mhm.
and to
Oh yeah.
maintain it.
Mhm.
Um, and in all actuality, it's not a church can be you just walking from door to door. So, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like, it doesn't have to be associated with that.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a performance at all. Like, not
Yeah.
one that is based in uh, lies or anything like that. But
Yeah. I think the most like spiritual experience I've ever had in a church was in the one that was like from like near like the plantation, and I say that because it was part of our family reunion like program. That sounds obnoxious, but it was obnoxious. It was like a 3-day weekend, and banquet, blah 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 blah. But we visit the plantation that our family came from after we look at like a family tree, and then we go to the church that like a lot of our family went to and stuff like that. And it was very small, and it was like, you know, faded windows, and it was, you know, red carpeting that was probably red 100 years ago. It's not so red anymore. It's like brown now, but it felt spiritual. And I think it was more so the idea of like family and family history. And so I think that's something that's so specific to maybe Black church or Black spirituality, is like the connection to family and ancestry that like maybe drives. And again, that's like putting church at the nucleus of like life for a lot of people, right? Like the Black church literally is able to contain so much of that. And to me, that helps me to understand like why. I mean, it's not so hard of a thing to grasp or understand, but it helps me to understand like why people can be so convinced by the theater, I guess, or like they can opt in so easily. It's just like, well, if it kept like the fact that like with Eula and Carletta, like that, like Carletta can be so committed to one life, but also kind of slip in and out of, or both of them really, like slip in and out of what they really truly desire. It's like, well, how can you refuse your desires? Well, one, society tells us to, but two, if your life is so opted into this almost self-contained life, society, culture, all of these things, mandates, rules of ethics, all of those things, then it's hard to kind of defy that.
Yeah.
You know, when it literally, it does so much for who you are.
And especially when you find out what happens to people when they do defy or go against these things that we've been taught to hold as treasure, these treasures, things we're supposed to follow. So, okay. So the next question is about colorism. So it asks, explain the connection between colorism and the Black church throughout the collection. So it asks two specific questions. Which women are the first ladies? Um, and which women are the mistresses?
Well, the first ladies are frigid and light skinned. I mean, it's the kind of like projected trope. And the mistresses, and they're frigid, and they're like, I think there was like a line or passage where they were describing like, you know, a woman's body and like it being like girdled in, shackled in, like very like contained, like the idea of like containing your curves, containing your body, to like, you know, preserve chastity, like preserve like, I don't know, whatever. And so that image of being like literally girdled in to conformity is what I associate with from these stories, like with the first ladies, and then the mistresses being like literally the unhinged version of that. And so it's like very much Nina Simone for women. It's like so like I think like curvy, uh, you know, projected as the whore, and darker skinned, which is entangled in the idea of like the Black woman whore, but also mammy. Like there's a lot of like conflating tropes happening with the mistresses, because it seems like they're not just doing, I mean, typical of those stories, right? But they're not just doing sexual work, but also providing a particular type of intimacy and, you know, emotional work at that point. So yeah. What about you?
I mean, that component, it reminded me of like Tyler Perry or something, like a film. Like,
Oh yeah, I
like
definitely got
like
full.
separation of like these women are here or maintain this status, and these women like failed to maintain any form of. Um, and I also think in Peach Cobbler, how the mother is like going back to what you were talking about, like is extremely contained, but yet doing this thing that goes against everything she would would say that she probably appreciates or honors about the church or about religion. But and it's like the containment is shown in how she treats her daughter. um but all of that falls out the window once the man enters the space. So
Yeah. It's interesting. So I think part of the reason why I love Peach Cobbler so much is because it reminded me of Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon. And um, if you read Song of Solomon, the mother of Ruth and Milkman are very similar to the preacher's wife and the preacher's kid, in just that um, I love looking at like kind of like nested like family dynamics. I mean like generational, all that stuff. And with Song of Solomon, it's one of the rare moments where Toni Morrison takes the male's perspective as a protagonist. Um, and and so it's really interesting to see. I mean, traditionally in a lot of Black literature, we see like the multiple women's generations, which I love. Like Breath, I thought a lot about Breath as Memory by Edwidge Danticat. I thought a lot about Jamaica Kincaid while reading these texts. And I would love to do a Jamaica Kincaid with the Smart Brown Girls. But and those are all looking at so much of Jamaica Kincaid's work primarily is looking at multiple generations of women, how the mother-daughter relationship and can be incredibly toxic, can nurture and harm a lot. My point being with Song of Solomon, and also what I felt similarly with this, is we're looking at mother-daughter relationships and also how the relationship to a man intervenes, right? And so even in Song of Solomon, it's not even just the relationship of the husband, right? Like the relationship to her son, for Ruth, really affects her in a lot of significant ways. I won't get too deep into Song of Solomon, but I really enjoy that book. But anyways, so I think yeah, I forgot what my original what the original thread was of the conversation.
but
But
about colorism and like these stereotypical, like I guess like the containment of
yeah,
demonstrating that containment through the way that the child is treated. So, in thinking of
yes.
Jamaica Kincaid, I think it's Girl, right? Is that the name of the book?
There's Girl, there's
Yeah, and it
Lucy.
reminded me of that actually, like this,
Hmm.
basically keep yourself together, like, because,
Hmm.
otherwise X, Y, and Z, like a man, you're not gonna get a man, you're not gonna be
Hmm.
successful, which equals getting a man. So, like,
Hmm.
you know,
And like literally like an instruction manual,
yeah.
like
Yeah, that
essentially,
actually,
right?
yeah, Girl actually is.
Hmm.
My computer is about to die, so I have to get my charger. But you can
Okay.
keep going.
Yes, at least start reading
Okay.
the next question, I think. So okay, so we discussed that one. So next we're transitioning to discussing Trevor, which is actually apropos to discussing gender in a sense. So Trevor is one of the, also shout out to Brie because this is a great syllabus and I've loved the conversations that have already been had on this book, which is why I messaged Nicole being like, I would love to discuss this book with y'all because this is a good read. I've been kind of in a reading slump, and so I haven't been reading a lot or reading a lot of fiction, and so this was really nice. Oh, okay, sorry, that is our. Okay, so Trevor is one of the few young Black boys mentioned in Philya's collection. What does Trevor think of his father and Peach Cobbler? Um, yeah, so Trevor is the PK, which I didn't know was a thing until that movie with Latoya,
Look
not
at.
Latoya Jackson, Latoya Luckett. um, was it called The Preacher's Kid?
Mm,
It was like a Lifetime movie or something, or
yeah.
something like that. Anyways, I didn't know that was like like a thing. Like I didn't know Jack and Jill was a thing until I like went to college and like encountered those people. Um, but yeah, by those people I mean like black people, black Southern elites. I guess is the way that I would broad stroke that one. Even though I
Yeah.
know there are PKs, like I know that that's probably a term in a lot of different places, but even as a kid who was like PK adjacent, I like didn't know that that was a thing.
I
Um,
didn't know it was a thing until my friend said it, and I was like, I had to like really think about it. Like, I don't even ask what it means, and then I was like, oh, I get it. Okay, okay, okay.
yeah, it felt like such a weird thing to share. Like I don't know, like I feel like that only works in a place where the preacher is of such like we were describing the distinction between types of churches, like how like they're like maybe in a place where there are like a dime a dozen churches, like little small to medium sized churches, and you just go to your favorite one. And the fact that your dad's a preacher is like, does that mean that we can't watch booty call? Like does like what does that mean? Like we can't watch whatever. But like in a place where a black church literally takes up the kind of societal work of a town or even a city, like there's such it's of that it's of high esteem, not just in the church but also beyond it. Then I could see that term being important. And seeing as I was not ingrained in any type of culture or society like that or town or community like that, that was just like okay. But I'm sure in the mega churches, PK is an important term. But yeah,
Or just
so
like in
Trevor's the
a
PK.
large family with multiple, who might have multiple like pastors,
Yeah,
certainly.
I
Yeah,
can see that. So Trevor is the PK, which here in
yeah.
this story is basically uh, a euphemism for the golden boy, and for all purposes. High yellow. He's the star on the football team, about to graduate. Has a perfect, similarly wealthy, similarly high yellow girlfriend. Um,
He also has blue
yeah.
eyes.
Oh yeah. Like this is like he's literally milkman. Like if you read Song of Solomon, he's literally milkman. It's like if you read this chapter and then you go read a Song of Solomon, it's like, oh, Trevor grown up, but transported to 1960s. Um, but yes, um, I think. Which speaking of, I'd love to discuss time at some point. Like the timeline she chose for this text, for this book. Maybe that could be like a question for like the author chat because I'd be curious
Yeah.
to know. Um, but yeah, so with the Trevor is perfect essentially. He's black upper class crust, no pun intended, but pun intended, because the peach cobbler is like the central metaphor of the text,
Yeah.
um, or like the central object of the text. Um, but yeah, so sorry, returning to the question. What does Trevor think of his father and peach cobbler?
I think he thinks his father is a joke.
I think he thinks that the life is like kind of like that his life is a joke. I don't want to say that his life is a joke, but like clearly he doesn't take a lot of what his life is seriously. Like the him being like, I don't believe God, prayer, all that stuff. Sure, fine, like you know, but also that he like fears his father, but like doesn't want to vocalize that. And then the fact that he doesn't share that he has a girlfriend, it kind of feels to me like he like recognizes. I mean, we could also just like defer that to being like, well, he ain't shit, like he's a cis straight man, of course he's gonna just sounds like regular fuck shit. But I think also it's to an extent like he's like aware of the facade, but he also just like goes with it because like there's nothing, it ain't broke, according to his mind. So like, don't fix it. Like, we don't get a sense of like if he knows about his father having an affair. And I think like, because and I take that as like him just being like, yeah, I'll just like lean into the phoniness that is my life. Like that's just kind of how I take it. Maybe that's just me reading far into Song of Solomon and the way that Milkman's trajectory goes. But I feel like, yeah, I feel like there's a lot of like places where it's like he very obviously is just like, it is what it is. I'm the product of these people and my life is golden.
Yeah. And I just see him as like emulating in a small way like the actions of his father. And just like basically over sexualizing this young girl who's coming to help you with your homework, right? Like, or your work, which is also like, so everything you have going on is a facade. So you got the looks, bruh, but everything else, not so much. So it's, to me, very much repeating what he has seen or seen in his father. I'm not saying I don't know about his father's academic abilities, but in terms of the way that he treats um, the daughter. So
Yeah, it's interesting because I wonder, they have kind of like this, Trevor and Olivia have like this kind of like unifying moment where it's just literally a union, to know someone in a biblical sense, that happening, but also in that moment, them sharing the intimacy of, no, I don't believe in God, no, I don't believe in prayer, which are two, for both of them in their positions, are seemingly very like, radical isn't the word I want to use, but like very like wild realization. So to share that amongst them is like especially intimate and rare and something quote unquote special. But I think or rather I should say, to question that in the first place and to share that questioning, that's such a high stakes question, right? Like if it was just like Joe Schmo if it was me just questioning the church, it wouldn't be such like a big thing. It's like, oh, you like halfway grew up in the church, blah blah blah. But for this person, for both of them to have such a close, intimate relationship with religion, to share that is like a very, I'll use radical revelation to have and to share. So like it's a very heightened intimacy, like far beyond just the sex that they have. My point being that like I wonder about in that moment, right? This very shared like paralleling of thought. I wonder if in that moment, about how they both come to realize that his father / God ain't shit. And so, because for her, we see that, right? Like we see Olivia kind of come to that realization through her relationship with her mother and her mother's relationship with this man and this man's relationship with God. But we don't really see that from Trevor. And so on one end, I kind of think like, oh, maybe, we can deduce that like he has a similar realization of his realization of his father and thus God being like fallible comes from a similar realization of his father's like affair, and the hypocrisy of his father's affair. On the other end, I wonder if he's had a different journey to that realization, and they're just kind of like a meeting of the minds at like, oh, he's not shit, but from different kind of
perspectives. Yeah, I don't know. I'm looking over some of the things, but
that's the thing with short stories too. It's like there's great short stories, people are always begging for like the novel of like, one or two of the shorter stories because there's so much that could still be unraveled.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
Yeah. It's like text within the text. So,
Yeah.
because I'm reading, I mentioned it the other day. I'm also reading the Office of Historical Corrections, and it's like after I read one short story, I sit there for like 30 minutes,
Hmm.
like that meme, like the little boy. But
Hmm. That's a
it's
real
like,
talent.
yeah, I just have to, because it's like you want to know all these other things, and it's
Mhm.
like up to you to figure it out, kind of like
Yeah.
to continue telling the story. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I think I always thought when I was younger, like that short stories, like collections of short stories were somehow like easier, right? Like we would read a lot of those in like grade school, stuff like that, like vignettes of these people's lives. But when you grow up and you realize just how messy people's lives are, and so then to write a shortened version of someone's story, an abridged version of this like whirlwind of a story, that takes talent, euphemism, subtext, like to, kind of, so my hat's off to her because let me tell you, my ADHD mind, I was I was focused. I was lasered in on this text. It was a very engaging read. And not
mm,
just because of scandal, but because of the level of engagement for such short stories.
yeah, yep. I mean, I same. I'll just say same about the ADD.
Oh
ADD for
yeah.
me.
Oof.
But yeah. So I actually am enjoying short stories now because it's like I can get through it quickly, but then I have time to reflect. And then I can do another one. Like
Mhm.
and
Oh
there's a
yeah.
sense of completion uh in reading, not necessarily in the story, but
Oh yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so we have a lot of questions for this session.
Okay.
Let's see. The next question is about Olivia's mother's reaction to Pastor Neely saying she should go to the birthday party, um, and what does the interaction show Olivia? And so specifically, one of Olivia's friends is having a birthday party and has invited her, and so she's nervous about asking her mom, but decides to do it anyway. And then her mother says no, basically shut her down. But Pastor Neely um, mentioned, suggested that she go.
Mhm. And not at all for the sake of Olivia. It felt like he was like very, because once he looked at her, he was just like, and back to this cobbler. Like it wasn't like he was like trying to stick up for her. It was very much like he needed to speak up for the Lord. Like I don't like he needed to get out his like mobile pulpit and just very quickly sermon to her since this
Yeah.
is her Sunday. Like he very quickly needed to have his moment.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, what did you think of that? Especially, I don't know, this
Well,
kind of like triangle of him, mother, daughter, but also here's this man sitting at the table.
yeah, there's this part where she says something about, and I don't know where it is exactly, but where she talks about not letting her go because she doesn't want her to like be disappointed. Like, don't
Mhm.
get in your mind that these things are possible. And it well, she didn't say it in that exact way, but that's what it made me think of. Like, I don't want her to
Mhm.
go there. They have things we don't have, and I don't want her to think that that's something she can have.
Yeah.
And it was actually really saddening to me. To I get it. I get that she's trying to protect her. Um, but I don't. It's just it's also like so surveilling that she's able to experience childhood. You know,
Yeah.
like you have to get peach cobbler out of the trash can
Yeah.
because you can't even have it. So like, you know,
Yeah.
um, and I don't know why it was so. I mean, I I guess like maybe it just reminded me of experiences or something from people outside of my immediate family, the way that they um responded to certain things in similar ways. Like you can't do this because da da da. Like, but it was always it didn't come across like they were trying to care. They came across as they were trying to as just kind of trying to like mean. That's what it sounds like. And I'm
Mhm.
sure that in this story, if we could talk to Olivia, she probably would be like, "My mama is mean." Like
Mhm.
this.
Yeah. I
So
definitely also like was reminded of personal experience, and I had a if I can blanket it, I had an okay childhood. I grew up in a very strict home, and my mother was the part that I resonated with. I'll say this is uh, the part in that same speech, not with like not wanting to see uh, like just to compare my life to other people, um, but which is interesting because we see that kind of thread through when she's tutoring, right? Because the mother is constantly asking questions of like, what was it like over there, and like, what did you eat? Oh, she only gave you grilled cheese, all that money she has, like, things like that.
mhm,
So it's not only it proves that it's not really just for her. She's not just protecting her daughter's feelings, she's protecting her own feelings too,
yeah,
right? To feel like she can't provide for her daughter in a certain way. So like when she finds out that they only gave her grilled cheese, she's like, "Ugh, I could internally, I'm imagining her dialogue is like, I could have done better than like, or
mhm,
I can do better than that." Like so that kind of being very self-serving as we understand the mother to be. All that aside, that is not what I resonated with. What I resonated with was when she was talking about being extremely private. Um, and my family is extremely private. And you would think that my family is like the most church going people because they are with the theater. Like my mom is the most private person, and you would never know it. Like when she's like out and about, people love her, people want to be around her, she's like life of the party. But like I know that to get her outside, she was kicking and screaming, I effing hate everything, I don't have any friends, blah 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 blah. And I'm like, damn. Like my mother's extremely private, we don't share our business, we don't talk about our business, like nothing leaves the home. um and so I really understood that because that can feel really debilitating as a young person trying to grow and experience things. It's um it's like putting on a mask. It's like I don't know how to be outside of my home. I'm honestly struggling with that now, right? Like in quarantine, where most of my life is lived out in my home, right? But I don't know how to act outside. I don't know how to relate to people. I don't know how to connect to people, like even people that I'm friends with. Like I don't know how to feel connected to people, right? And so that's something that I struggle with now. And that part I really resonated with, of like, your life is private. Well,
mhm.
then what the hell do I do with the rest of my 24 hours? Private for maybe 11. What do I do with the rest of that, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine if the pandemic had occurred during this time in their relationship.
Ooh.
Like,
Ooh, she would have
like,
kept that fist up and then she would have left. She'd been like, I'm
yeah,
going somewhere else. Anywhere
yeah.
else. Yeah. The
Um,
the money part was really interesting to their relationship. That part felt, and I mean this in the most respectful way possible. That moment felt, I just kept on thinking about Sanaa Lathan in The Family That Prays, in Tyler Perry's movie, when she was like, my son is whatever that white man's last name was. Um, but where like she's the life that she has, everything that she has is wrapped up in this man. I mean, it's not a very novel idea, I guess, but it just, I don't know, for some reason you were mentioning the Tyler Perry isms that you felt with the whole like
Yeah,
colorism thing, and that was uh the Tyler Perryism that came to mind when I was reading this. But I think it's fair with all the knocks we can make against Tyler Perry. I think it's fair to compare only because literally Tyler Perry lore is wrapped up in the church.
it is. I was just
Um,
about to say that. Yes.
so it's like it's no diss to the novel because it's a great novel. And to be fair, The Family That Prays is probably one of his better dramedies. That I don't even know what genre. The genre of Tyler Perry is just Tyler Perry
I don't know. I
stories.
don't even. I don't. I tried to watch it when it first started coming out. I didn't go to the plays, but when it first started coming on television,
I
never.
was
Those
13 years
plays,
old and
I feel like the whole black family was going to those plays.
oh, my parents hated it. They would buy it to me begrudgingly. They'd be like, "Here, have it." They were like, "I
It's
don't
not. I
get it."
could not get into it at all. Like it just
But they
wasn't my.
love the movies. I was like, "I don't get it. You hate the plays, but you love the movies?
This
Fix it,
person
Jesus."
says y'all need to be rebaptized. Well, if it mean
Never
not
been
liking
baptized.
Tyler Perry, then I'm not going to engage. So
I'm Kathy Bates in The Family That Prays getting baptized. Watch that. I literally, whenever people ask about religion, with me, well, first of all, people in my adulthood don't ask because usually I would have purple hair, piercings. It's a general, like,
there are assumptions made, probably.
right. But with when I used to wear, it was a graduation present, I used to wear a cross. Uh, I'd be like, yeah, this is more for fashion. I'm vaguely spiritual. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a self-described heathen, so
Mhm.
you must be baptized to be rebaptized. To which I have not been.
So there are some questions, and I think these two can because we're not like we have 7 minutes left and we have like 10 questions left. So
Oh my goodness,
maybe like
we do.
12 left.
Oh wow, I didn't scroll to the next page. I am
Yeah,
sorry.
it's
Well, I feel
okay.
like a lot of these are very generally our thoughts on the Black Church.
Yeah.
So maybe we could read a couple.
So one of my favorite sections was one that correlates to a question about instructions for married Christian husbands. Did
Oh,
you, that one? So we can skip to that if you don't mind.
yeah, sure.
Um, so it the quote reads, means continue teaching Sunday, leading the Boy Scout troop, and serving on the deacon board at church. So it's from that section. She's instructing men who perhaps might come into her life who perhaps want a relationship on the things that they should expect and not expect from interactions with her. And so it's like a rule book. Like this is your guide. If you read through the guide, taking your time as you read, you shouldn't have any questions. So, but so the first question related to that is the narrator here does not long to be saved. How does this stance fit with larger themes about religion in the collection? So again, by all means, basically continue doing what you're doing related to the things that you do. And really, I'm not asking for. I think it connects to Peach Cobbler specifically,
Mhm.
like with the mom. Like, I'm not asking for your input. Basically, I heard her saying, she didn't say, but I heard her saying, like, this is my child, not your child. I'm not asking for you to give me feedback or to provide suggestions. You are here for one reason and one reason only. So,
That's interesting because I was watching some video. maybe with the author, um, or reading a book review, and someone mentioned how they thought that the author or the narrator for the final that chapter, the section, the instructions,
Hmm.
um, was Olivia. And I couldn't.
Oh,
Yeah, I forgot to go back. I meant to go back and read to see like what kind of was it Easter eggs or whatever dropped.
like
But I feel
context
like
clues.
that's a very
Yeah.
compatible reading of like, so both of those combined reminded me of Sula, which we read. Did we read for the book club? Sula?
I might not have been with here yet.
I I, I think they did because I remember watching the recaps or the chats and people being like, Sula was wrong. And so I think yeah, it reminded me of Sula, in that there's this person who is resigned to the position that they have, like they're not the wife and they have no aspirations to be the wife. And so I feel like it would be very fair for Olivia to have taken on that kind of perspective as the narrator of the instruction manual, because I think, and first of all, I love that it's not an instruction manual for women who sleep with married men, right? Like it's very antithetical to Jamaica Kincaid's Girl, even its satire, like Girl being like the instruction manual given to women. And she's like, well, my satire, my irony is that I'm giving this instruction manual to the men. Like this is their code of conduct since they already kind of abide by their own sense of code of ethics. And so I think it's very reasonable to deduce that Olivia would make such an instruction manual where she's very like resigned to the position of I have no aspirations to be the wife, because I
Mhm.
think she sees both sides of it, right? Like she has sympathy for the preacher's wife and she has some level of sympathy but also resentment towards her mother, right? And so with the chapter of Peach Cobbler ending with her feeling so powerless, literally like the emblem of power being the fist, and her just like releasing it, right? To then jump to her being resigned and then in some ways content with her position so as to create an instruction manual for these men. She's like,
Yeah.
it's we see even in the short story of Peach Cobbler, like her slowly feel like everything is inevitable. Oh, it's inevitable. This man's fucking my mom in the window. Great. Oh, it's inevitable. Trevor's gonna hit on me because I got big boobs. Oh, it's inevitable. People are gonna try and grope me and assault me. Like everything feels kind of inevitable.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I see that. I see that possible link.
Um, so someone on Facebook said they quoted the peach cobbler section in the letter, and I found it. It has to
Yes.
be her. It has to be. It has to be.
Yes.
So it says, I have no children and I've never been married. My life is my own. Even that, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's my own. It doesn't, I don't have to do for anybody except for myself. I own a bakery, which is probably where we met. Maybe I baked your wedding cake or your daughter's birthday cake. I make the best peach cobbler in the city. I grew up watching my mother eating the crumbs and leftovers from another woman's table. I swore I never would, and she swears she never will.
Mhm.
But here I am, grubbing, licking the edges. So,
It's
yes.
like she encapsulates it's like she encapsulates both women, both the preacher's wife and the preacher's mistress, and also rejects them at the same time.
Yes, yes.
Because she has a somewhat respectable position, right? Like she has her own, right? Well, the preacher's
Yeah.
wife doesn't have her own, and neither baby does she, but she has a somewhat respectable position in the community. Like I have these relationships to all these people, similar to a preacher's wife, similar to that preacher's wife, but she's also acknowledges that as much as she has a bit more self-awareness than her mother, but she's
Mhm.
also accepting, something less than.
But
Um,
is it? Because for her, like, so I guess is that less than? Because she is, I feel like she has the ability to, if she wanted to get married or to do these other things, she could. And I
Yeah.
feel like she is in control of this situation. Like, these are, this is everything that you need to know when it comes to dealing with me or being with me. She talks about money and things like that, feelings. So
Mhm.
she doesn't do feelings, which is mentioned. Um, and then gifts are welcome, but do not offer me money or to pay my bills. I'm not a sex worker. That's another connection because
Yeah.
Pastor Neely was paying the mother's bills.
Mhm.
So like the idea that that relationship is needed because there's a dependence doesn't exist in that part.
Yeah.
Um, it's like she flipped, flipped it on its head.
Completely. And I think of thinking about this connection between that chapter and the last. I think about her mother saying something about like I don't want you to turn into me. And in my mind, the kind of like subtext or the dialogue in Olivia's head was just like, me wanting to bake like you does not mean that I aspire to then give
Hmm.
the like, to me it was just like another moment of like disconnect between mother and child, where she was like, oh, you're not even getting why like I'm doing it. I have no aspirations to be like you. I aspire to be good at baking and also to feel close to you. This has nothing to do with this man, right? Like life
Yeah,
doesn't defer to this man. Just because, I mean, for the time being, yes, their lives do, since he pays for everything, and like literally her entire life is wrapped up in her mother's relationship. But her mother's reflexes, you know, this must be about him. She's like,
yeah.
it's
And there's one last question, and I think it connects to everything in in this entire text, related to secrets. So it asks, do you think the Black church create the need for secrets? Explain why or why not.
yeah. If we think about, I think an underlying theme for this discussion of the Black church is definitely theater. And so if we think about the aspect of theater of like improv, it's kind of like the secrets are like the yes and. You can only sustain the dialogue, the scene for so long as you yes and, right? So I think in order to sustain the higher principles and all that stuff, but also live your life, you know, given to your desires, have aspire for something different. You have to lie to live one way, sustain another.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like secrets sustain most structure, the government,
Yeah. They're
religion.
embedded in families. I mean, most social
That's
institutions have secrets that kind of bind them.
yeah. So, it's not just the Black church, but like
No, it's
specifically,
the church, period. It's
right.
religion. It's
Yeah.
it's education. It's like you said, like these structures.
And I think that ties in also to what I've been thinking about, like the chosen timeline of this. Oh, I'll also in the comments link, in case anyone's interested. The author created a playlist, a music playlist for the book. So it puts together like there's like Patti LaBelle, Fat Boys, Peaches, like all that stuff, like all the stuff that are referenced. Uh, and the timeline of this text, being pre-social media. First of all, I don't know, it's like kind of annoying reading fiction with social media. It's like maybe it's a personal pet peeve, but it's just like so like I don't want to. I read texts. I don't want to read texts in a like I read. But
In the book.
anyways, so yeah, I don't want to read references to uh TikTok. I don't want to do that. Um, but I think something I was thinking about is, and this ties into the idea of secrets, is if you're talking about the church literally being this self-contained life for a lot of people, right? Like a way that their lives are completely structured, the basis of their life. social media in the last decade has really propelled connection in a way that, like, one, secrets aren't really secrets anymore, and actually secrets become public knowledge at this point. Like, it's there's that, but also I feel like, just watching TikTok, we see uh a universal, even in so many very specific experiences. Like, if you get on TikTok, you learn a little bit about, a biracial boy in Nebraska, more than I would ever know or want to know, right? But like, you get a glimpse of their life, right? And so I feel like that sense of connectivity, like, you can't, I don't think you could get Olivia in a story of today. Like, I feel like there's a specific sense of her entire life is singularly wrapped up in this mother's relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And like, there's no recourse from that, right? To the where she like literally like violently rebukes it at towards the end, being like, why did you make this decision? Because I don't have control, and so it's not like you literally forced me onto Trevor, but like, your choices essentially did, right? And so I don't think you could get that in a world of such connectivity that we have now. I'm not saying that trauma can't happen or doesn't happen, but just to say that, like, it looks a lot different, and it happens a lot differently, right?
Yeah.
And so I think with the question of secrets, I think there's a part to that, right? Like, how would secrets in a church unravel or be supported by that sort of level of connection? And I think this time frame of like Y2K, all that's the literal fear of the internet. I think that this time period is really useful in setting the scene for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Secrets. Think on it, everyone. So that was our last question. We are over our hour though, but it's so
Yes.
fine. Like, we, for the most part, finished. And I believe, Monday is the day for the author chat over the Secret Lives of Church Ladies. And I'm trying to find the info.
It's
Um,
oh, my computer decides to glitch. Um
let's see.
Oh, it is Monday, October 4th at 3 p.m. Central, so that's 4 p.m. Eastern
Yeah. Yep.
and 1 p.m. Pacific.
Ooh. But make sure you join the conversation. Questions like the one CJ had about time, and like with social media, even thought. I mean, well, it was because it was in some of them, but not all.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. So make sure you submit your questions and check out the author chat. So, thank you.